Hello everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. My name is Belle Johnson with Vasaj Communications, and I'll be your moderator today for the event, which is titled, It's Okay to Not Be Okay. It's National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, as most of you know. And given that, we're going to be having a conversation that's going to be engaging, interactive, and we're encouraging our attendees to please join us by putting comments and questions in the chat. Anytime there's something on their mind, we encourage them to just kind of join us. Our mission at Keep Our Troops Alive is basically to provide support, bring greater awareness to issues associated with depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicide ideation. Next slide. At Keep Our Troops Alive, the organization has also been designed to provide a strong level of committed support to military families and to those who have experienced the death of a loved one by suicide. Next slide, please. Although the organization is newly created, actually it's only about a month old, the organization has already gotten off to a very rapid start in making a difference in the lives of many people, military personnel, veterans, as well as civilians. As a first-time introduction, we're really pleased to be able to introduce to you today our founder, Toby Raminez-Johnson. Toby is the founder as well as the author of the new book, The Last 7 Days, Suicide, A Sibling's Perspective. Toby is a public speaker, an entrepreneur, suicide awareness advocate, and you may have seen her yesterday on her television debut where she was sharing her story. We appreciate Toby and we're very excited about the impact on the lives of many people that we know that she'll be able to bring. Okay. We're honored to have a distinguished panel that will be sharing their wisdom, their experience, and insight with us during this webinar. Our first panelist is retired Major Eric King from Dallas, Texas. His deployments include 3 tours of combat, 2 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan, and also a humanitarian assistance deployment to West Africa, Liberia. Major King is also the founder of Vets What's Next. This is a nonprofit organization that he started after returning from combat that basically serves as a one-stop shop for military personnel in need of resources and support as they're transitioning. Our next panelist has been the White House executive chef for the last 4 presidential administrations, Chef Andre Rush. Chef Rush is known as a celebrity chef. He's also a combat veteran with several tours of duty. He's a motivational speaker, he's a military advocate, and he's known internationally for doing 2,222 push-ups a day. Yes, that's right, 2,222 push-ups a day in honor of military veterans who have lost their lives to suicide. And our final panelist for the day is Dr. Carleah East. She's a licensed mental health counselor. She's a clinical therapist, professor of psychology, and also the founder of and CEO of Smile Psychology and Associates. Dr. East will be bringing us information that is going to help us to understand in layman's terms exactly the meaning of PTSD. She's going to be breaking everything down for us so that we can understand and be able to help others that may be struggling with this very difficult situation. Or even if you're experiencing it yourself, she's going to help you to be able to know what to do next. Okay, great. Now, for a bit of housekeeping, we'd like to thank all the attendees who are joining us today. And we encourage you, as I said earlier, we encourage you to make this as interactive as possible. We'd like for you to put your comments in the chat, identify exactly who you would like to answer, whichever questions you may have. And then also, we want to make this quite a fun activity as well. We have some door prizes that we're going to be giving away a little later in the show. So make sure that you watch and stay to the end, stay for the entire show, because we do have some surprises that we think that you'll really like. So pull up a chair, stay to the end, and we'd like also right now, if everyone could just put their city in the chat. We'd like to know where you're coming from. If you can put the name of your city and state in the chat, that will give us an idea of who's joining us today. Okay. Now, to set a baseline, 22 veterans take their lives every day. 22 veterans take their lives every day. That means that that's more than we feel is really acceptable. You know, according to the World Health Organization, one person dies from suicide every 40 seconds. That means that since we've been on this broadcast, several people have taken their lives. So what we're trying to do here at Keep Our Troops Alive is to help veterans to reclaim those lives. You know, we want the lives of our mothers, our fathers, our brothers, our sisters, our cousins, our nephews and nieces. We want them to be saved. So we're here and hoping that this platform will serve as a place where you can grow, where you can be encouraged, and also have a platform of healing. Now, to get this amazing conversation started, allow me to introduce to you the founder of Keep Our Troops Alive. She's the reason that we're here today. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Toby Raminez-Johnson.
Well, good afternoon, Bill. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to have you moderating today and just to be among these distinguished guests that we have. And I just thank them again for taking time out of their busy schedules to join and really share their background and expertise in this area. So on behalf of the KOTA organization, we just thank you. We're excited to host today's event. And as Val went through, you know, Major King, Chef Rush, and Dr. East, their bios, and you may be saying, okay, Toby, how do you fit in this equation? And, you know, I was thinking about that, and no, I did not serve in the military, nor did I attempt to take my life, but I did have a brother, Sergeant Kenneth Saavedra Jr., who did succumb to suicide 8 years ago. So, you know, as I was thinking about today, I just want to share a quick topic with you called suffering in silence. And on August 28th, many of you are aware that the actor Chadwick died. And he was a son, he was a husband, he was well educated, he was an incredible actor that broke a lot of racial barriers. And when he died on the 28th, so many people were just hurt because they just felt this amazing connection. But then when they found out at that point in time that he had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and didn't tell anyone and was enduring this for the last 4 years, that he really went through and suffered in silence. And he was still making movies, he was going through treatment, radiation, but no one knew. And when they found out that part of it, he was really now deemed a hero. Like, wow, he was suffering, but he was still going through this. But now I want to share about the many men and women who are husbands and wives, fathers, mothers. They're also educated with careers. They come from an array of cultural backgrounds. But every 40 seconds, they're succumbing to suicide. They also have been suffering in silence, but unlike Chadwick, these group of people are often labeled as cowards, weak, selfish, heroes, like the furthest thing that comes to mind. And why is that? It's because mental illness and suicide have been those taboo conversations that we were told not to talk about. And my brother suffered, he succumbed to those demons that just taunted him. And he was just trying to find solution to the pain of what he was going through. So on today, we just thank you for joining. We are asking you to come in with an open mind and heart, and I guarantee you there will be a nugget for you to take away for yourself, maybe to help somebody else. And really, the goal of KOTA is just to encourage the conversations to happen, to make the dialogue a safe place that it's okay to talk about if you don't feel okay. And that's why I just love the topic of today. And I thank Chef Rush for that, where it's okay not to be okay, but guess what? Let's do something about it. So with that, Val, I'll turn it over to you to get us started with our panelists.
Okay, thank you, Toby. You know, you're absolutely right. A lot of people are suffering in silence. And it's often the individuals that we see as being the strongest ones that are sometimes the ones that really need the most help. You know, those that seem the most visibly productive in society, they're not necessarily okay. So it's like you said, you know, a conversation really needs to start. Sometimes we have to reach out to our friends and our loved ones, especially during this time when there's a lot of depression and we're isolated. We have to reach out and make sure that, you know, everyone is in a position where they're, you know, I hate to keep using the word okay, but that's the word of the day, you know, making sure that they're okay. And if not, we need to be able to try to position ourselves in a way where we can provide some support. I'm especially honored today to be moderating this event because my father served as a combat veteran for 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. And I feel like going through, you know, as we're having this webinar and talking more about issues pertaining to PTSD and suicide ideation and depression, I feel like I've been learning a lot more about what veterans have had to struggle with, you know, and I feel like he displayed a great deal of strength in his sufferings that were never told. And so I'm really honored to be able to know that I'm able to recognize the strengths of not only veterans, but everyone, you know, today in society, you know. So what I'd like to do next is to start the conversation rolling and get more in depth about issues from a personal perspective. So I'd like to start with Major King, if I could, please. We know that you've had 3 tours of duty, Major King. Mm-hmm. You served in Afghanistan and Iraq. Correct. And we know that it had to be extremely difficult for you to be away from your family. And I'm sure there were plenty of challenges that you endured when you returned. We'd love for you to speak to us about your personal experience and how repressed trauma may have impacted you after your return. You know, anything that you can tell us about, maybe, I don't know, I hear the term quite frequently, living with guilt. That just share, you know, how you overcame those issues and where you are now.
Absolutely. Well, first off, I would like to say hello to everyone, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this platform and this panelist to be able to speak to so many people. And I am confident that somebody will walk away with something that they did not already know. So for me, serving in the military, which I was so gladly to do, and if I can don a uniform again and do it, I'll do it in a heartbeat. But unfortunately, due to the multiple deployments, as you stated, 2 to Iraq and 1 to Afghanistan, during those first 2 deployments in Afghanistan, in Iraq, I experienced some things with the enemy. And those things led to me suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, a traumatic brain injury with residuals of a seizure disorder, and many other ailments. As you mentioned, the guilt that came with what I had experienced, it was simply because of the stigma that is associated with what we go through each and every day, especially being in a leadership position, just, you know, serving in the military. You don't want anybody to look at you as if what Toby mentioned earlier, of being weak, of being a coward. So the first time that I knew that I needed some help after coming from a deployment, after being blown up by an IED, had casualties and things that comes with that. and being told that it was my fault as a leader on that mission, that what happened had happened. And I lived with that guilt, and I tried to cover it up. I tried to wear a mask, you know, a costume over my uniform to try to, you know, suppress or mask what I was going through. And when I noticed it was impacting my everyday life outside of the military, with my family, my personal life, I knew I needed to go and get help. And the first time I went to go and get help, as I was there in the behavior help center there at Fort Stewart, Georgia, a soldier of mine that was in my unit was there in the building. He saw me. He said, "Captain King, what are you doing here?" And at that moment, had I said, "I'm here to get help," I felt that I would have been a coward. I felt that I would have been weak. So I lied. And I said, "Well, I'm here to check on a soldier," when I was actually there for myself. And I turned and walked away. And what I did at that moment was a failure on my part for not continuing to get that help that I needed, that it could have been a positive message going back to my formation, to other soldiers, to say that, hey, it's okay to not be okay, but this is what we're going to do about it. We're going to get help. And what that did for me, it led on to more issues that continued to develop within me, to make me to the point after a while that I went to commit suicide. I went to take my own life, and I would have been a part of that number of the 22 that we experience right now today. But our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ sent my son, Eric, into the room at that moment I was about to take my life. So it was devastating for all of us. And at that point, I knew then, after all that I was going through, that enough was enough, and I had to do something about it, which also transcended to me starting my nonprofit organization, Best What's Next. And Best What's Next is a nonprofit organization that provides a consolidated hub to manage services, resources, benefits, jobs, and so much more for our veterans, active duty service members, to include our families, because they too experience what we experience at their level. So being able to get that readily available information of those services, it will, in hopes, which I know it will, reduce the number of what we experience each and every day with our veterans. Because veterans get frustrated as we have veterans take their own lives in front of the VAs. Because why? They had a claim that was denied. They had a claim that they told that it's service connected, but you're going to get a 0% rating. Simply because when that soldier got out of the military, they did not go directly to the VA healthcare center to enroll to get their benefits. They waited for so long that when they finally filed their claim, it was denied because there was no lineage. And Best What's Next is here to break that up, to provide them that information that 180 days prior to getting out of the military, you can apply for your VA disability. Once you get out of the military, we will walk you through that process through our mobile application, our website, to help you get those services that you need. So it's very imperative and important that we all continue to come together and have these conversations and make sure that we're taking care of those who have taken care of us by keeping America safe.
Wow, that's great. My goodness, you've been through a lot, and we're really fortunate to have your nonprofit to be able to facilitate the needs of other military personnel as they're transitioning. How do you see the future of your organization? Is there a particular market that you're trying to reach?
Absolutely.
How do you?
Yeah, absolutely. We are focusing on all categories, all tiers. Millennial X, Gen X, as well as our senior veterans are all our target audience. But our future endeavors that we are pushing is to be able to continue to provide a product, a service that each branch of the military will be able to adopt the Best What's Next mobile app, that when that soldier is getting ready to transition out of the military, and that soldier sitting there in that room and they're receiving that out processing brief, that instructor is going to tell that soldier, pull out your mobile device, download this mobile app, Best What's Next, because the information that we just put out to you, it may have went in one ear and out of the other. Because we have to remember, these soldiers are so focused on what is life is going to be for me outside of the military. What is life for me after the military? And once they exit that gate, they're focusing on what life is going to be, job, families, etc. But if they know that they have a mobile app that they can go to say, How am I supposed to file this claim for these benefits? I know. Best What's Next has that for me. What services can I go and get for these mental health issues or any type of issue that I'm dealing with or my family's dealing with? I know I can go to Best What's Next because there are so many great organizations out there that's willing to do some great things for us, but they're everywhere. And what we've done is what Amazon has done to the market. We brought it to one centralized location. So you can get what you need as if you was going to Walmart, Target, the mall, or whatever you need to go to. Well, Best What's Next going to provide those services as we're doing right now. And it's also, lastly, it's a platform to allow outside entities, businesses, etc., to plug and play their capabilities within the Best What's Next mobile application and website so it can reach the veterans community and population.
That's wonderful. And where can we find you? Where can we find?
Yes, we are on www.vets, V-E-T-S, what's W-H-A-T-S, next, N-E-X-T.org. That's vetswhatsnext.org. And you can download the app the same way. It is available in the Google Play Store, and it will be available for Apple iOS next week.
Next week.
And we're also on social media. Just follow the handle Best What's Next, or you can Google Major Eric King, and you'll get that information you need.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, congratulations on the success of your nonprofit. We wish you well in every area, and we're sure that you're going to achieve every goal that you set forth. I wanted to go forward with a question to Chef Rush. Chef Rush, are you able to unmute your microphone? Chef, can you? Okay, perfect. Okay. Chef, we know that you've seen a lot, okay? You've survived several tours of duty. You were in the Pentagon when the plane crashed on 9/11. You have literally lived the lives of several men, you know? You've gone through so much. Speak to us about the difficulty of perception. You know, a lot of people see you, and we know that we see your videos. We know you're on television, and not only are you a celebrity chef, but you're known for having 24-inch biceps and bench pressing 700 pounds. So people see you as this larger than life individual sometimes. Speak to us about how that can be a deterrent for individuals seeking help because they see you in a certain way. Speak to, you know, is there a difficulty that you've experienced because of the perception that you can share with us?
Of course. First off, thank you for having me here. I love this whole platform, and Toby and all the panelists and yourself. And I think you hit on it here. The Major, he hit on it also a little bit because we get the perception of being these big, tough males or females, alpha males or alpha females who've done all these wonderful things. When I say wonderful things, that a lot of people don't get to experience or know even in detail what it is. They can just kind of make an assumption. You know, no one knows what the Major's been through, what I've been through. Even if we explain it to them, they still will have no clue whatsoever. A lot of people say, I understand, but that's not the whole gist of it. So the fact of the matter is that it's extremely hard with it to do that because it's so difficult with us being who we are. And that's the reason why we say it's okay not to be okay and put our platform in front so people can understand that.
I understand. Okay. My goodness. Tell us about the 2,222 push-ups a day that you do and how that is a reflection of your passion for suicide prevention and advocacy.
It is. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop for 5. We have an alarm that's going to go off. I apologize. They just said it. I don't want it to interrupt us.
No problem. No problem. We understand. No problem. So we're going to transition right now a little bit to Dr. East. Dr. East, we're so glad that you're here to help us to better understand PTSD. You know, a lot of individuals who are not directly connected to the military, we hear the phrase, but we don't necessarily have a full grasp of its meaning. Can you tell us the difference between just basic trauma as we understand it to be in today's society and stress, and PTSD and how it can be identified. And okay.
Sure. So I think, first of all, again, as everyone said, thank you for having all of us here, but thank you for having me here on this platform. So let's get to the chase. When you're looking at stress are just those, daily hassles that don't go well for individuals. And so we all pretty much have a good idea of what stress is. It's those annoying things that we just sometimes can't let go of. And sometimes there may be physical, attributes that are associated with that, such as headaches, muscle aches and pains, migraines, things of that nature, difficulty sleeping. And so we've all had those stressful moments. Trauma is when there's a situation that's associated with stress that then leaves an imprint on that individual. And so that individual is left with this residual energy from this trauma that they have experienced, these leftovers, as I call them, from the trauma that they've experienced. So these leftovers will often cause avoidance, which is where you have your post-trauma. So this is where there's a trauma that happens, there's leftover residuals, and your PTSD is really about the fact that you are unable to move on past some or all of these particular traumas. And so people will use many different methods to deal with that. They will use avoidance. Well, they would try to avoid the whole situation, but that also means that they end up having to avoid anything associated with that as well. And so that ends up taking up more space, more energy, less time with their families. That ends up turning into isolation. And so there ends up being this kind of a domino effect when it comes to all of this. Okay. Now, when you're looking at post-traumatic stress disorder, it's important for us to recognize that this is not just something for our military. This is for anyone who has gone through any traumatic experience. Not to say that Toby has PTSD, but that's an example. From her experiencing the passing of her brother through suicide, that's a trauma for her. And so she could also be dealing with some post-traumatic stress, of that particular incident. Major's family, being a part of his just emotional feeling, even though they did not witness anything or see anything, just the emotional trauma that he went through trying to make sure he was good could then leave residuals. And so we need to understand that when individuals are dealing with trauma, it's not just about that person. It's about all these several layers that are connected to that individual, which includes family and friends. We too also go through trauma. So in understanding that, I think it's also important for us to understand why our military personnel are a little bit more, sensitive and capable of having PTSD, more so than any other person. Well, I think the common sense answer would be they're exposed to so much more than your average American citizen is exposed to. The responsibility alone, if they're not exposed, it doesn't, just because they're not on the front lines, doesn't mean that they're not experiencing trauma. If they're on that radio sending those signals back and forth, they're responsible for the flights and landing of airplanes, which is responsible for the savings of thousands of lives. Who are we to say that that person is not experiencing trauma from being responsible for that type of decision? And so I need us to understand that it's not just where we're on the front lines, but it's also those that are behind the scenes that are dealing with those traumatic experiences as well. And so it's all about the susceptibility of the individual and how that impacts us. Individuals in the military are constantly exposed to traumatic situations. In some situations, they are exposed to it intentionally to desensitize them so that they are able to be prepared to do what they need to do in combat, which is why they have drills, which is why they may have virtual reality, sessions where they practice drill sets. These are necessary to make sure that when they're on the front lines, they do not get fearful and are unable to protect, the country that they're there to serve. So we have to recognize all these different levels that are taking place and the responsibility that not only society puts on, we put on our soldiers and our men and women that serve, but what about the pressure that they also put on themselves? What about that responsibility to protect and serve? It doesn't say to have an opinion. It doesn't say to complain. It doesn't say to whine. It doesn't say to have a mental health issue, right? It doesn't say any of that. It says protect and serve. So, we're almost treating them like superheroes of not being human, when in actuality, they are one of the most human and vulnerable individuals that are out there because they're there to protect us. And so I wanted to really clearly paint that picture of how the trauma can definitely set in for individuals that serve. And then for those of us that are loving individuals that serve, I just want to give you some tips of how to love them better, right? How to approach that a little bit better. I think it's important that we understand that everyone is happy when our loved ones return home. Of course, most of us should be happy that they're returning home, right? And there's this wonderful honeymoon period that takes place because we're just happy that they made it, and that we survived, another 4 years or however long that was.
Right.
But then reality sets in. The honeymoon period is over. And now he or she that has served has to get reacclimated to civilian life, which is something that they hadn't lived for years.
Right.
There are noises that they're used to hearing that they're not hearing now. Sometimes the silence is too loud. And we need to understand that sometimes silence for our veterans is too loud because they're used to going to sleep with trucks and combat and maybe computers and what have you. And so there needs to be that. What about the disconnect that they end up feeling from their family? The child who was 2, who's now 6, the loved one who has the routine all set for the household, and now you coming in interrupting the routine. There's all these different types of emotions of trying to figure out where they fit in. And then what about dealing with their own trauma of what they've experienced? What about their own guilt of what they've missed? How they haven't been there for these milestones. So it's important that for those of us that are supporting those that have served, that we understand those sensitive levels, that we understand those quiet moments where it's really not us. It's really not. Like, they literally need to just isolate for a minute because maybe the sounds that are going on around them is too much. Maybe the concern for your safety is too much. We have to respect the fact that they may want to sit facing all exits. They may survey rooms before they walk into them. That's automatic safety drill, so they're still in that zone. We have to respect the fact that parties with lots of loud noises and champagne popping and fireworks and all those celebratory things that we love to do may be triggers for these individuals. So it's not that they don't want to be there to enjoy your gender reveal party or your birthday party or your bar mitzvah. It's not that they don't want to be there for your quinceañera. You know what I mean? It's not that. It's that there's so many triggers around them. They don't want to spoil the day for you. They don't want to make it about them. And so oftentimes they choose to sit out. They choose to have a seat. So we have to support them and then remind them that it's okay not to be okay. And then remind them that there are supports out there like Major. There are supports in organizations like Toby and myself. There are practices that focus on veterans. There are groups. So it's really being gentle and being kind, being patient and understanding, and then giving them permission to not be okay.
That's so powerful. Everything that you said. And, this is what is so important to the mission of KOTA is these conversations. I wish that I knew this 8-9 years ago, because I knew there was issues with my brother, but truly red flags would have gone up. Fireworks, he couldn't be around that noise. One day he was sleeping and my son at the time was like 8 years old, went in to scare him and my brother almost punched him in the face. And then my son, now he was traumatized and my brother felt horrific. And we just don't know. But one of the points you said was about that training beforehand. And as I've been digging in and searching this, I was realizing that a lot of people suffering from depression that's in the military have never even gone off to war. A lot of it is the training they've received. So when they are trying to function in regular life, they're already been trained in this capacity. And, it is very stressful for a loved one. And my brother was engaged and they broke up because she could not deal with what was going on. And no fault to her, there's just a lack of understanding. Mm-hmm. But one thing I realized, especially in 2020, where we're with this pandemic and COVID and isolation, is the number of people that have been reaching out to me have not even been in the military. This is people that you went from working and having a full life to now being home. You may have your children, you're trying to homeschool. Your town is telling you you can't go out unless it's the grocery store. You can't even get toilet paper when you go to the, just things that seem to be in a movie, but has not prepared us. So this is a topic that's not just relative, very strong in the military. That's what we're talking about. But many people that I know are even dialing in through Facebook Live, they're experiencing this as well. So what would you say to that population that you're saying, wait a minute, I feel like I have some of those signs right now?
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think it's important to tie the both of them in. And I'm going to actually use a comparison to tie the both of them in. When you look at individuals that serve in the military, what's the first thing that they do? They leave everything that they know, right? Everything that they grew up with, all their foundations, all their family, all their friends, to make this sacrifice, right? They sacrifice their life to go and protect and serve. And so they're put into a completely new environment, a new culture, a new world, where they are told from day one, okay, this is it. So knuckle up, let's go, and continue business as usual. When you look at many of us, what we experienced during the pandemic, what we're still experiencing, because the pandemic is still quite here, and also the many pandemics that we're experiencing, whether it's racial, social, economic, whether it's gender or sexuality based, we're dealing with these. We in essence were what? Taken out of our norm, everything that we knew to be our way of life, and put into this box and said, hey, knuckle up. This is the way we got to do this from now on. Now, I know the two are definite extremes, but what we're looking at is, at least in the service, it was by choice to serve. This was not by choice. This was absolutely by force. And we know it was for our safety, but still we had no decision in it. And the fear of the unknown is still very ever present. So I'll give you examples of things that you may have experienced and how you can put fillers in those spaces. Number one, I think it's important that we recognize that there is going to be about 30% of every last one of us, no matter if you was right as rain and as sunny as the sunniest day, 30% of you feels kind of like what? Feels kind of meh, feels kind of down, feels agitated, may feel sad, may feel anxious. 30% of you feels like that. Other 30% of us, of every single person on this planet who understands what it is to be a human being, is experiencing these emotions. And so I want to say that first, accept your 30%, because that's the percent that we cannot control. Those are the external factors, such as COVID, such as racism, such as sexual transgressions and socioeconomic status, our kids going back to school, what not to do, those things. We don't have control over those things, right? We can vote, which can help us have control, but as it stands, we don't have control over that. So that's that 30% you can't control. So accept that and be okay with that funkiness, that you're gonna feel, because that thing is going to be there until it isn't. Now, the 70% of us, that is what we can control. And so what we have to do is, first of all, acknowledge the fact that the typical way that we went about our day is still not the same. Those of us that are going back to work, let me say that very clearly, they are not feeling normal going back to work. It is not a normal experience for them to be back in the office. It's not a normal experience for you to, you feel normal until you get out of your car to go to Publix and have to make a U-turn because you forgot your mask, right?
Yeah.
And then you're reminded.
Yeah.
Not that you forgot, but you're really reminded, like, okay, it's still scary out here. So, we need to understand that everyone is feeling stressed no matter what their situation is. The parents that had to make the decision to send their children to school are stressed about that. The parents that are homeschooling their children, we're stressed about that. So the first thing that we have to do is really respect one another's decisions and how we're managing through these pandemics. Because I think that our first step as human beings is often to judge others, because it allows us to disconnect from our own pain and the things that we're feeling. So the first thing we need to do is wake up with some gratitude and acceptance of, guess what? This is what I have to do for my family. And I respect and understand that every other American family has to do what they need to do for theirs. The other piece that we have to recognize is that those basic day-to-day activities that we did that helped us deal with stress, we no longer have those. So whereas I would walk the hall and stop by my coworker and we talk smack for 10 minutes before classes began or before we begin to see clients. We don't have that 10 minutes of talking smack, which was really a stress relief session, is what it was, for us to do every morning. We don't have that. And I didn't recognize how all those little 5 minutes, 2 minutes, just walking from the car to the building, just having that break, just driving from one location to another, which used to annoy me, but now I realize was my way of decompressing or preparing, for ever I was leaving from or going to. Those are the things that many of us have to realize. Those have been compounded. And so we have to make sure that we are putting positive things in place of those. So those positive things can be, first of all, recognizing what you need to be grateful for, even if it's just a sunny day, even if it's just the rain because it helps to put out fires, even if it's just the fact that you and your family are safe. It's okay to celebrate the things that you're accomplishing, even when the world seems to be in chaos. You worked hard for those accomplishments. Do not let things that are outside of your control diminish the things that you have been able to control and that you put into, place for yourself along with your prayers and your faith. I think it's important that we take breaks throughout our day to disconnect from social media completely. I only tune into the news twice a day, in the morning to figure out what happened overnight, and in the evening to figure out what happened through the day. And as a therapist, it helps me because many of my clients want to have those conversations. So I'm more so forced to be on top of it because it's part of my business. But if it is not part of your career, pick a day where you just don't tune in, or just tune in once. Pick one news channel that you trust and let that be your go-to once a day. And then also put aromas around you. Put lavender, put chamomile, put, peppermints and citrus for energy, and peppermint for clarity and for headaches, and clary sage for motivation and calm, and lavender for peace. You know what I mean? Put those things in your spaces, whether it's in your car or at home. These are things that we have to do a better job at. And then pick one day where you don't log on, where you don't turn on, where you don't flip the switch on. Just pick a day where you are just you and your family, or you and your pets, or you and your garden, whatever it is. Pick that day and do not turn on anything as far as social media. Catch up on movies that make you laugh. Play games with your kids or your family. Go for a walk. But pick a day where you're not allowing social media and society to dictate your mood. And so those are some of the basic tips that I can give everybody.
No, it's perfect, because so much of what you've mentioned has been my new world this year. Our kids went off to college. I'm not dealing with the homeschool situation, but now we have 2 dogs, and I'm all about the aromatherapy. It's like, that's another session we have to do, Dr. Easton.
Yes.
Perfect. Chef Rush, thank you so much. I see that you joined us back. We are getting tons of comments online. Someone saying, being a widow of a veteran, I wish an app was available to me at that time. So Major King, a question I have for you is, if I heard you correctly, as much as you endured on these tours, and physically what happened, mentally what happened, did you say that if you had an opportunity, you would go back again?
God bless America. I definitely would.
Wow.
Definitely would.
Tell us a little bit more, about, because what I think is sometimes people don't value enough servicemen and women and truly understand that mindset, that heart, that it is like that a phrase, ride or die, like you guys really mean it. So, tell us, where does that come from, that determination, that drive to, even say that?
A couple of different things, and I'll just sum it up real quick. I'm very patriotic. I'm one of those who love America, and I support my flag because the red, white, and the blue to me symbolizes and means so much, as the red is for the blood that we've shed. The white is to show that we would get out and fight, and the blue is show that how true we are to America, to American people, and that we won't let anything come in to disrupt what we have going on. And we would neutralize it, we would defeat it, eliminate it at all costs. So being able to serve when I serve, to be able to lead soldiers into combat, to personally witness soldiers who are my true heroes, to lay their lives down on the front line of our country, that's the least I can do, is to go back and fight of our country so that my children, children, and their children will be able to have a greater and better America.
You know, my brother had that same mindset. And, you know, there's a scripture, I know I'm going to misquote it. And it was his favorite scripture, talking about when a man lay down his life. And that's, you know, how he felt, and that brotherhood. And, you know, there's just one thing I just want to point out. I actually saw Major King, had no connection to him before. His app was on Facebook. It must have been a sponsored ad. And it came across my Facebook, and I was like, let me just inbox him and see what happens. He immediately responded, gave me his personal number to call, and, you know, shared his story with me, allowed me to share the story, and said, whatever you need, let's make it happen. And that's definitely been the same mindset with Chef Rush. It's, you know, and he's a very, very busy person, and it's whatever I can do to support. And that's really what this community has been about. So I had someone just reach out right now online. It says, I would love to help other wives and families. Their husband, they're a wife, surviving wife of a veteran. So once again, we're going to get the mission accomplished. And I always said, my brother fought overseas. That was his mission. And this is my mission right now. Val, I'm going to turn it over to you. I know Chef Rush had to dip out for a moment, but I'm sure you had another question, and we want to make sure we get him on.
Yeah, we just wanted to get a little feedback from you, Chef Rush, regarding the 2,222 push-ups that you do a day in honor of the 22 veterans that commit suicide each day. You know, can you tell us about your platform, your passion, your advocacy, and why it's important to you?
Of course, and apologies again for having
no
to step
problem.
out.
We understand.
But I'm all about, just like each and every one of you, it's about helping people, giving back. There's giving and takers in this world. There's not enough givers, right? Everybody wants to take, and in the military, it's a mixed platform, because you do have givers, you do have takers, and that's just the way it is in life, right? I've seen so many, like Major King. I've seen so many things that's happened, and I started my 2,222 push-ups a day because of some personal things. I was in inpatient for 6 months, another inpatient for 6 months, and outpatient for 12 months, and I got minimalistic from it. But what I did notice, I paid attention to the givers and takers, the one that were taking care of me, the one that was there for me, and how it was going. As I was there, I realized that I need to help other people as a natural instinct, as a natural leader, and doing those things. One of my soldiers unfortunately committed suicide hours after calling me. He was a young African-American male, and about 24, 25, put him on the Food Network, and happiest guy you could possibly meet. I mean, just happy, just all the time, wife, 2 kids. And he called me, and I was helping some other troops. And hours later, he called me back and said that he committed suicide. And in the military, and Major King can contest to this, you know, we have that, sometimes that survivor's remorse, right? And it can be overwhelming. It can bring on anxiety and depression, and also more PTSD. But we have to caveat that, instead of me saying, I feel what happened. I had one of my guys yesterday with 9/11, of course, which is personal to me, say the same thing, that he was there. I was in the Pentagon when that happened. And I said to him the same thing I'll say. I took that and I turned around. I embraced it, and I said, this is for Sergeant Durden. I'm going to do this for him. Vicariously, I'm going to lift him up and everybody else with it. Us being who we are, I decided to do the 22 push-ups a day, of course, with 22 vets committing suicide, but I wanted to caveat because 22 wasn't enough. When I say not enough, to get someone's attention. If I do 2,222, the first thing people ask me is, why 2222? They don't say, wow, they go, oh, but why are you doing 2,222? You know? And then I explain to them the reasons behind it, not only for the military, but also the most important part is about the spouses and the kids that are mostly unheard, right? Those are the ones that we need to take care of the most. Every time I go, and I always ask to speak to the spouses first, because they work so much harder than we have, right? If we did all these things in all these situations to prepare for combat, to prepare for this military life, and they haven't, how do you think that affects them when we bring it home to them and to the kid? And then you got the whole thing with bullying and the anti-bullying and the social aspects of it. So I tell people, I start off with my foundation, which is the military. We're doing 2022. But the truth of the matter is, it can be any cause, and it's all around the world. It could be cancer, it could be ALS, it could be just for good health, it could be for prayer, it could be for kindness, it could be for understanding, but do it for a reason and why.
Excellent answer. I mean, we applaud your efforts in helping to make this community stronger and healthier. We have a question in the chat that I want to go ahead and address because of the sake of time here. There is a question from Glenn, and he says, the panel has touched my life with experience I relate to, being diagnosed with PTSD due to a horrible crash, and being an Army brat, I felt less of importance or not a true PTSD. There is a question that he has as well related to that. It says, it was 20 years later that I was diagnosed. Does it take longer to heal due to not treating it earlier? I guess that would be a question for Dr. East. Does it take longer to heal?
I answered him. I did answer him already, but I'll answer since you've read it out loud. But my answer basically is this. It really depends on the individual. We're all susceptible to trauma differently on different levels. So, you know, when you look at studies of twins who may have experienced the same house fire, one twin may have said, okay, well, I get to buy new stuff now. Meanwhile, the other twin is dying because everything that, you know, he or she loved is in the house. So, you know, the susceptibility for trauma is really about the individual. So I'll say that first. And when it comes to healing through trauma, specifically, even if it's not acknowledged by the, you know, larger masses, not every time, because it's not acknowledged, does that person take a longer time to heal because it wasn't acknowledged earlier? That is a misconception. Again, that is on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes when an individual has lived with their own stuff for so long, they've learned how to survive, you know, with that stuff. And so when they finally do get those tools, they're like, oh, well then, hell, now I can dump the rest of this off because, you know, I've done the work all these 20 years and now I only just needed you for like 2 more years. So it really depends, you know, whereas some individuals who maybe they haven't dealt with anything, maybe they've suppressed it the entire 20 years, and that's different because now I'm uprooting, you know, and digging up some things that just kind of has been festering for 20 years. So then that may be a lot harder to kind of heal from. So it really, you know, it really kind of depends on that person's ability to live with that trauma and in spite of that trauma and how they've been able to successfully navigate that as far as, you know, if it hasn't been solved earlier, if it takes longer to resolve it at the end.
Good answer, good answer.
The one thing I wanted to add is I could definitely relate to that comment of feeling left out. And that's how I felt when my brother passed away, because when I was trying to find resources, there was resources for spouses of suicide, children of suicide, parents of suicide, but I couldn't find anything from that sibling's perspective. And that's really how that book was birthed, because I said, you know, siblings have such a unique experience with each other and a unique relationship, but I couldn't find anything. So, you know, I always encourage somebody, if you're looking for something, you can't find it, then create it and let's get it out there, because chances are there's somebody else looking for the same thing.
That's true. That's very true. Let's see, we have just a few minutes left, but I'm going to go back to our Q&A and see what we have. A question from Ellsworth Williams. What are the top 3 mental health disorders related to suicide?
So that would be, as I'm answering in the chat as well, you have depression, substance use, antisocial, which will also deal with your isolation, withdrawing. And then another one that people forget is your shifts in mood. So, you know, anger versus being happy, being completely excited versus flat affect, you know, so those things can take place as well.
Okay.
I would just say from a personal experience, because I dealt with it and still do, guilt is one of the big ones, but also too, one of the big things